hands.
Amen.
Take a deep breath.
Yeah.
All right, there we go. Perfect.
Shake it off. Okay, so hello. My name is Kadeen Brooks. I am 30 years old, originally from Lauderdale Lakes, Florida, in the Fort Lauderdale area. But my family is originally from Jamaica. I grew up in South Florida, moved to North Carolina to attend college, and I went to Duke University. And then from there, moved to DC. I came here almost 10 years ago, attended Howard for law school, and now I'm a practicing attorney.
Mitch Brooks, fifth generation Washingtonian, I'm American, I like to say Ghanaian descent on my paternal side, and Cameroonian descent on my maternal side. Born and raised in Washington, D.C., went to attend school in Tallahassee, Florida, Florida A&M, returned to Washington, D.C. in 2009, and I've been here in Washington, D.C., back home since 2009.
So, you said your family's from Jamaica,
Mm-hmm.
and you're a fifth generation Washingtonian. Your parents, could you talk a little bit about their origin, maybe a time and place where they were born?
Parents.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. My mom was born here in Washington, D.C., one of 9 children. And her mother was born here in Washington, D.C., and my grandmother's mother was born in Virginia, somewhere. I don't know the county. I know it if I saw it on paper. And my dad was born in Washington, D.C. as well. And his mom and dad was born in Washington, D.C., the 16th Street, D.C. area. And their parents came from, I believe it's Calvert County, Maryland. So the Chesapeake Bay area. Yeah.
So you say fifth generation, and then you say 16th Street. You know, if you live in D.C., you kind of address the different areas of D.C. as northeast, southeast. What zone?
Well, that's northwest.
That's northwest. Okay.
Yeah. It was a historically predominantly black neighborhood. I think it, to a great degree, it still is to this day.
What's the landmark in that area that people know?
I think 16th Street is the landmark. It's sort of like saying U Street.
Okay.
Yeah. I think 16th Street is the landmark.
Is that kind of like it's not Adams Morgan, is it?
No, it's a little beyond Adams Morgan. Yeah, a little east and north of Adams Morgan.
Kind of going towards Columbia Heights? Because Columbia Heights is 14th, and then that's going...
Now, it's closer to Adams Morgan than Columbia Heights.
Okay.
Yeah, and so Adams Morgan, you know, like where the McDonald's is over there, and if you were to keep straight up that street, let's say that McDonald's is to your right, and you make a right, and you keep straight up that street, and then 16th Street is to your left, because Adams Morgan's like 18th, 19th, 17th Street.
Okay.
And so you want to go back east and go to 16th Street, you make a left. And if you keep straight up 16th Street, that's pretty much the black community was sort of forced and pushed to that part of town at one point in time in DC history. Let's say like if history is correct, like the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s. And then it started to transition to a more like upper black middle class neighborhood in like the 50s, 60s, 70s. Yeah.
So I mentioned that my family's from Jamaica. Both of my parents were born there. My dad in St. Catherine, my mom in St. Mary, Jamaica. Their parents were born there. Their grandparents were born there as well. And I think one or two generations before that on my father's side, I think my mom's great grandfather is Scottish, and my dad's side, great grandfather is Cuban. But as far
Cuban? You got some Cuban up in you somewhere? I didn't know that.
Yes, you do
Okay.
this. So mostly Jamaican ancestry or her heritage, but a couple of other folks sprinkled in the mix. And my parents moved to the States in the 1980s, like the early 1980s. My brother was born in 1985, and I was born in 1988. And we've been here ever since.
Do you know anything about your parents' upbringing? And specifically, you know, whether in the military, did they grow up in an educated household? Did they, you know, what was their financial status? Things like that.
Yeah, I've been tracing my family history for the past 4 years now. And so luckily I know a lot of that information through like the research that I've been doing. But prior to doing an extremely deep dive, I had no idea. My family on both sides was working class. I'll say poor to working class, unashamedly so, I'll say. I think that for generations, that's been the case on both sides of the family. My mom upbringing, she was one of, and so, and it's my understanding that on Christmas Day, when my mom was around 12 years old, her dad left her mom. And so I definitely see the ripple effects and like the effects of that being the case and what that's like, what that has been like for them. And interestingly enough, it still sort of plays out and manifests itself to this day. But nonetheless, at the same time, I think there are a lot of pros as well as cons that came from the situation. So they're a pretty tight-knit group, they're close. And I think that based on the stories that they've shared, DC was a very interesting place, particularly when they were growing up. I'm sure a lot of folks from different regions and areas of the country can say that, but DC as the nation's capital, and a lot of like activism going on here, and folks from around the country coming here, from the Vietnam War to segregation to a lot of our black leaders came to the city and sort of used this as a home base, right? So from Thurgood Marshall to Vernon Jordan to Marion Barry to Eleanor Holmes Norton, and my family, with and despite the socioeconomic status that they were in, like really actively looked to participate in that movement. And my dad's side, I don't know much about my dad's side, and I think that's the reality of black men being traumatized over history through their different set of experiences and not wanting to talk about it. I tried to talk to my dad many times about, so how was it with your pops, and how was it with your grandpops? And I wouldn't get too much from him, but I've been able to piece some things together over the years, and so it's my understanding that I'm Mitchell, Alexander Brooks IV, which means that it goes for 4 generations. Mitchell Alexander Brooks I was in the military, in the Navy, fought in World War I. Mitchell Alexander Brooks II was in the Navy and fought in the Korean War and World War II. Mitchell Alexander Brooks III, my dad, was in the Air Force. And so there's this, I think, long lineage of folks being involved in the military and being closely connected to the country. But I guess sort of, I'll phrase it as, them fighting and putting in work allowed me to, choose a different route if I so chose to, right? And for me, it was more so like school, academics, business.
Do you have any brothers and sisters?
I do. I had 2 brothers, a younger brother, older brother. Yeah.
And the same family and everything?
Yes. Well, it's interesting you asked that question, brother. It's very interesting you asked that question. So my older brother does not have the same father. I learned that was a family secret that I learned when I was in college, a freshman in college. Not sure how that came out. I think I was just asking the right questions, and this time people decided to be honest with me to give me the answers. I really do. And so, it was just asking different questions. Literally one day being home from school, going through photo albums, and asking, but why this and why that? And how come this look like this? And how come I look like Pop and Ty look like you? Like, I haven't quite figured out who Jerome looks like. And it was those type of questions. Just one, very chill, happy, spirited day at home. And that's what I learned. So yeah. I mean, we have all grown up in the same household, and take into consideration for 20 years, I didn't know anything else, right? So it doesn't change anything, but I think it's that initial pain of learning that you were deceived for so long. I think that understandably so, at this point in life, I don't second guess it, but I think the thought was that, they wanted you to be at a place mature enough to accept it, right? And to know that doesn't change anything, and don't make jokes about it growing up, and Lord knows we may have, or probably would have, right? Or don't say things like, you're not my brother anyway, right? And so I definitely understand like the idea of being mature enough to accept that. But I do, Lord knows that never happens with me. But I question what I would have done in that situation to my kids, right? And sort of how I want to raise them or plan to raise them. And so I don't think I'll ever have to worry about that, but it makes you think, right?
So, parents are from Jamaica. On my mom's side, she's one of 3. They're a very, very tight-knit family. It's her, an older sister, and a younger sister. So, growing up, at least with my mom's side of the family, I was always very close to her sisters and the few cousins that we had on her side of the family. But to tell you a little bit more about her backstory, my mom, like my dad, grew up poor. So the stories that you may have heard about how, kids from the islands are walking miles to school and their one pair of shoes that they have for the year, or no pairs of shoes, that was the type of experience that my parents had. So growing up, I remember going back to Jamaica and visiting my grandmother's home, my mom's mom. And she lives on a kind of like a side of a mountain. It's called Lucky Hill. And in order to get there, you kind of have to climb. It's always difficult as a younger kid, at least, trying to climb up the mountain to get to the house. But one of the things that I will never forget is just how different the structure of homes in Jamaica is compared to where we live today. So you have the aluminum, the tin roofs, kind of the brick or stone building itself, but very modest. It was a very modest way of living, and they didn't have a lot of money growing up. So one of the things that I think my mom, well, both of my parents wanted for us is for us to be able to live and experience something different than what they experienced, which is part of what made them decide to come to the States to begin with, wanting to be able to navigate in a different way where their children would have a better life than they did. So mom grew up very poor, but she came from a very close-knit, very, very loving family, which I think helped to translate it into the way that she raised my brother and I, very much so. My dad's side of the family, he is one of 9 as well, I think, or one of 8. And they're also very close, but it's different. It's like a different type of closeness than the way that my mom and her sisters are. They also grew up very poor. And one of the things that I remember learning about my dad as I was growing up, and then it kind of registering more as an adult, is him growing up in Jamaica, but not being able to finish his education. So going to school and then stopping because he had to work to help support the family. Going to school and then stopping and then never going back. So he never went to high school, never went to college. As an adult, young adult, after working for some time, he went and started working with immigration in Jamaica. My mom around this time did go to school. She went to teacher's college and became a teacher while she was in Jamaica as well, which I also think helped have such a big impact on my brother and I in terms of the importance of education. But that's kind of their backstory. They met, ended up coming to the States, to New York initially, then to South Florida.
It's like the Jamaican path.
Yeah, it's the Jamaican path. It's the Jamaican path where they left Jamaica, went up to New York. I think my dad went to New York first, and then
he said it was too cold. He wanted warmer climate.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if his mom had already moved to New York at the time, but growing up, I remember, or kind of some of my earliest memories are, on my mom's side of the family, my grandparents were still in Jamaica. On my dad's side, my grandmother was living in New York. I had a lot of aunts and uncles that were in New York. So I spent time kind of between South Florida, Jamaica, and New York. Those were kind of the main focal points for the family. But yeah, that's kind of the start of things.
And your parents still together to this day?
Mm-hmm. They are. So they've been together or married for 35 years. 34, 30, I think 35. 34, 35 years now.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you said you had siblings too?
One older brother.
Next question kind of revolves around your personal upbringing.
Mm-hmm.
You've told me about your parents' upbringing, so you've introduced the element of your past. And so how was your upbringing? And some of the things to focus on are, traditions, any specific cultural things you might have did specifically with music, art, holidays, religion.
Mm-hmm.
You can tell an anecdote that might sum it up, anything that kind of determines like
Black culture.
it ain't even,
Tradition.
it's gonna be black because you're black. But I'm saying, like, Well, it's determine what you were or were not given as far as life experience, and that's really kind of like what I'm interested in as far as your personal upbringing.
Hmm. So say the
Is it what you were or were not given?
That's a good
Is it
question.
your past experience really kind of
we're not
upbringing
given
tells that?
in the context of Black culture.
No, in the context of just your upbringing. I mean, because again, like the culture, it involves all of these things that you were
Yeah,
involved in.
yeah.
So you know what I mean. What you got as a child or what you didn't get really determines where you kind of
Are going.
where you're going or how you
Okay.
how it has affected you when you get older. You know what I'm
So
saying?
what I did get as a child was the sense of love and closeness with family that was reinforced. Um,
How was that expressed? What did you guys do to show that?
yeah, I would say the first thing I'll point to would be holidays. Holidays was a big situation for the family. Holidays as in Thanksgiving and 50, 60 people being in one home and the matriarch of the home sort of being there and feeling that love, and everyone wanted to express that love, one to her and then to one another, because they knew that was her wish, right? Christmas tended to be or I would say just the holiday season, because eventually my mom shifted to Kwanzaa. But Christmas and Kwanzaa was a big to do for my immediate family and extended family, and I think that was the opportunity. I venture to say for the working class in general, to be able to say I wasn't able to do much during the year, right? But I've set some things aside and I've made some sacrifices, and I'm gonna make you feel as special as possible, right? During this time frame, during the holiday season. And so, I think that I don't think much about what I was not given as a child. That may manifest itself in ways, but I think that what I did, and I got to a place in life, I think around middle school or so, where I was able to sort of process and acknowledge what I was given from my family, and where there were voids and where I could get those voids filled, right? So whether that was organizations, or whether that was friends of the family, or whether that was through education and reading, or whatever the case may be. And so I definitely didn't sort of navigate and go through life thinking like, if only I received this, or if only I got that from my family. I sort of, and I think that was a part of my upbringing, right? To not make excuses, just in general, but to figure it out and to make it happen. And so that's my thoughts.
Yeah, you spoke that your mom switched over to Kwanzaa. I mean, what was what I'm saying? That's interesting. That's exciting, I guess.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah. So my dad is, I guess I'm like my dad. I was gonna say my dad is like me, but I think I'm like my dad, where at one point my dad was like, "Tell me what you want for Christmas. Write it down, and I'm gonna go get it." And then he got to a point where he was like, "You know what? Here's the money. You go get it." And I was like, "Oh, I love this," right? Right? So as a little kid, you had your $500 or whatever the case may be, and I learned I had to budget that and be like, all right, I want tennis shoes, and I want this, and I want that. And as a kid, we loved it. And my mom, that didn't sit well with her. I think my mom wanted more about like the season, the reason for the season, as they say, is about Christ, and it's about religion, and being thankful and being grateful. And so my mom wanted to she tried to, I think, reinforce that with the Christmas holiday. But I think that things like commercials and advertising and all of that, like the whole world was sort of going against her and trying to reinforce that. And so she changed up the game completely. And in my early teens, she transitioned to Kwanzaa for the household. And it was good, man. I think that initially, when she said, "Hey, we're gonna do something different this year," you know, we just wanted to know, are we still gonna get our same toys and money allocation? and you know, my mom sort of stopped everything cold turkey and said, "No, no more money, no more toys, no more clothes. You're gonna make something, right?" And so I think that first year or two was an interesting transition. My dad sort of still stepped in on the back end and looked to make sure you had something, but he allowed that process to play out. And so yeah, and we fell in love with it. I think we fell in love with it when we had a chance to sort of talk about our year and everything that Kwanzaa stands for, right? Going through the principles, talking about how you applied those principles last year, how you plan to apply them the next year. And I can say, you know, as a black man or black boy in the 90s, I think that was exactly what we needed. I believe so. And I think that it instilled some values and principles in us and made us mindful of those things at a very young age. And it allowed us to like navigate the world in a better way. And so this sense of sort of collective responsibility and supporting black businesses, and you know, before that was sort of this, I'll venture to say, sort of this trendy sort of thing to do. You know, at 12, 13 years old, you're talking about a kid that had $1 and was like, I'm gonna go to this store, and this is the reason why, you know? And those type of values and principles stayed with us. And it's very clear to see like it stayed with us to this day.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. I mean, most people, when they think of Kwanzaa and like why somebody would switch over to it, people automatically, I don't know, let me not say people, I automatically assume that it's like, oh man, people trying to be on some like woke stuff or whatever.
Mm.
But your reasoning for it was a great reason to not represent, you know, this commercialized version of Christmas, but to introduce something to your kids that could be more valuable for them. I mean, that's like a total transformation, like what people, I guess, assume Kwanzaa is, and you
Right.
do something positive. You know what I mean?
Right.
I like that, man.
Credit my mom, it's not me, but yeah, it's like definitely kudos to her for that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, Kadeen.
So I think my upbringing was very similar in some ways, very different in some ways. Very similar in the sense that our house was filled with love, and we celebrated Christmas and Thanksgiving and like spent a lot of time together as a family. My is just my parents, my brother and I, so we spent a lot of time together. But a lot of times for the holidays, we would have my mom's sisters and her cousin and her, or my cousins coming down from New York or from Jamaica to Florida, or we would go down to Jamaica to celebrate the holidays, or my dad's sisters and brothers, like that extended family, us going up to New York or Connecticut, or them coming down to South Florida. And I also had some family in Orlando, which is where I was born, and we would spend a lot of time with them as well. So the holidays for us was very important. But I was mentioning to him recently, I stopped asking for gifts probably when I was like 11 or 12.
Yeah.
We got gifts growing up, and my parents were always very intentional about trying to make sure that we felt loved, and part of that was through gift giving and those types of things too. But a lot of the focus for the holidays, Christmas in particular, was centered around church and like Christ and all of that. So doing the Christmas plays and singing in church and participating in the youth choir and all of those types of experiences. That was very much so how love was expressed, and what kind of the focus of the holidays was for us. And I think that translated throughout the year. So my brother and I spent a lot of time in church growing up. My brother actually still spends a lot of time in church as a musician for different churches down in South Florida. But that was a huge part of kind of how I saw myself and how I experienced love from like my family and my community. My parents were also extremely supportive of my brother and I as we participated in and did just a ton of different things. Academically related, extracurriculars, so everything from the swim team to music competitions to academic competitions, all of those types of things. Like they showed their love by supporting us and being present for those experiences. And I think it's similar to Mitch as well in that I don't think I thought about what was lacking when I was a kid, whether we didn't have something or whether we got it all. Like I felt like I had a great upbringing, I think in part because I just had a really loving household and I had parents who just did a lot to show my brother and I that they cared about us. So, yeah.
I just wanted to clear something. I didn't mean to say, talk about what was lacking. I think I was more or less just pointing out that when you talk about your upbringing, it shows what was lacking, or what wasn't lacking, and just in the explanation. That was actually a personal note that I had for myself. I shouldn't have read it, but I'll take a note next time.
I got you.
Because we'll focus in on that.
No, but I appreciate you guys' answers because you kind of answered it anyway. You know what I mean, in a perfect way. You good? You want to take a break?
No, I'm good.
You sure?
Yeah, I'm good.
Because I know that chair could be uncomfortable.
Yeah, I'm good.
It's not too much more. So talk about what you guys do now, and you could just give kind of a brief overview of it, and just tell me about how your path has led you to that occupation.
Okay. You want to go?
Yeah.
Okay. So the short answer, what I do now, business executive. I'm chief operating officer for a small business in DC. Successful and prosperous business. So very fortunate and blessed in that sense. How I got into business. So when I was a young kid, I thought that I was like the next coming of Mike before LeBron, and I was growing at a rapid pace, right? And I was pretty good. My mom would make me go to bed early. Imagine that, a superstar young man, and she would not let me finish watching the basketball game. And she would make me go to bed early. And so I was never like able to see, the third and fourth quarter of the Bulls game or whatever the case was, right? And so the next morning on the way to school, my dad would pick up a newspaper and my dad would drop us off at school. And I would ask my dad for the sports section. And a part of it was because I didn't want to be vulnerable and while kids in the first period are talking about, did you see that game? I needed to act like I knew something, right? And I saw something. And a part of it was, beyond just that one game, I wanted to see just how the sport world in general was doing, right? And so my dad, at some point in time, he enforced a rule where he said, you can no longer just grab the sports section. You need to grab something else, and you need to tell me what you read about when you get home. And in the Washington Post, the business section comes after the sports section. And so, as a kid, I forget how old, but I would grab the sports and grab the business. I would read the sports, I would pass it along to my friends, and I started to read this business section as like a kid, 8, 9 years old. And I just got fascinated by the business world, man. I was fascinated by, Michael Jordan is a great athlete with great fame, but he makes $20 million, and the guy that signs his check makes $200 million. And as a kid, like, it doesn't take much to understand, like, oh, that's like, he's living a great life. Like, how is this possible? He's not doing nothing, right? And you realize that, yes, he's doing something as a business person, but I always sort of thought after, I'll say, that process, this may have been 3rd grade, 4th grade, my dad was doing this, and I realized, like shortly around that time, that even if I were to play basketball, I was going to look to save my money to go into business and to do some things in the business world. And so when that didn't play out, and in high school, I immediately knew what I wanted to do with my life, and I went to Florida A&M, like knowing at 17 years old that I wanted to go into the business program and get a business degree. Yeah.
So I am an attorney, and I learned, or I recognized when I was in college that I wanted to pursue kind of law and policy. But to back up and give kind of a little bit more context and some of the backstory, when I was younger, like I think many Caribbean children, I wanted to go into medicine. I wanted to be a doctor. My mom is a nurse. My dad was involved in real estate and later in politics, but kind of growing up, I had an interest in medicine and science. I loved math. And I had my mom kind of in the household as a nurse talking to me about medicine, patients, and all those types of things. So I attended a pre-medical magnet middle school that allowed me to focus on the sciences and math and all of that, and did the same for high school. I attended a high school with a magnet program that focused on sciences and medicine. But when I got to college, and I think a little bit before college as well, but there were different experiences that I had that started to shift the way I saw the world and shift some of my focus. So while I was at Duke for undergrad, I became a part of Duke's undergraduate judicial board, which is a board of students and faculty who have an opportunity to hear different cases where students have violated some university policy. So that can range from academic dishonesty to sexual assaults, theft, kind of you name it, it runs the gamut. And I was sitting on this board, and I had an opportunity to help decide what happened to these students. So some of them were expelled, some of them suspended, some of them had some other penalty or punishment. But that experience, coupled with opportunities that I had while growing up in Florida, as well as when I was in Durham, working in Durham public schools, I started to see how small and sometimes large decisions that people make completely shift the trajectory of their lives. So when I was in Broward County, I was a part of Youth Leadership Broward, and I remember attending one of our programs. I went to the Broward County Jail, and I saw an old classmate of mine who was there, and I thought about just how different our lives ended up because of decisions that people have made.
That's deep. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I don't know if I mentioned that. And I think those thoughts and those memories or those experiences hit home when I was at Duke, because I was in a position where I was deciding what happened when someone made the wrong choice. And at that time, I started to get more interested in politics and policy as well. My dad at that time was also involved in local politics in Lauderdale Lakes. So when I was in college, even though up until that time I had been focused on medicine and health. I remember going home for spring break and spending time with my parents for part of the time, and in Miami for part of the time. But when I was visiting my parents, I remember sitting down at the table with my mom and my dad and asking them, you know, if I shifted what I was doing from medicine and health to law and policy. And that's kind of the start of things. I moved to DC, interned on Capitol Hill for 2 members of Congress, then went on to intern at DC Superior Court, and then kind of went on from there to law school, and here I am now.
You met your husband in the process.
I did meet my husband in the process. So
Yeah.
I met my husband prior to law school.
Yeah.
I was, well, let me,
Yeah.
I'll touch on.
The people want to know the story.
So
Go
I'll,
ahead, talk about your relationship. That was the next question.
so I was going to talk about, I'm going to say briefly kind of the type of work that I do. So I work in kind of the corporate law space. I work at a firm in Washington, D.C. It's like an international law firm, and my work focuses on white-collar defense litigation and government investigations. So clients who are being investigated by Department of Justice, FBI, those types of things. So my work is really twofold, and so I'm really happy about the experience that I'm having as an attorney now, especially because I think you come across a lot of attorneys who don't like their work and don't like the work that they're able to do. But to get back to the important stuff, Mitch and I met in 2011 when
when you were like putting together.
I was studying for the LSAT.
Yeah.
So I was studying for the LSAT. I had moved to DC in 2010, and this was 2011. So it was a year after I'd been in DC. I was working at the time, studying for the LSAT, and was just involved in kind of different things in DC, different organizations. And one of the organizations that I was involved in was a political fundraising organization. And the goal, and at this time it was around President Obama's reelection, was to raise funds from and through young Black professionals. I can't remember the age now, but it's 20-somethings, 30-somethings, up to early 40s. I got involved with this organization to do some fundraising, and someone who was a part of the organization that I was involved with wanted us to, and Mitch at the time, actually you're probably better telling the story, but Mitch at the time was going to be hosting an event for President Obama. It's a fundraising event around his birthday. It was on August 4th, 2011. We met at the event because my organization was supposed to be attending, and we ultimately were going to be working with Mitch to host an event. But we met there, and
that's the story.
Yeah, that was kind of the start of our friendship, relationship, all of those things.
Her life changing for the better.
That was the start of
in my life changing
the rest of life together.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right.
But yeah, I don't know what else.
No, that was good.
He's a better storyteller than I am, but 2, he's a better teller of this story as well. So I probably didn't do it justice, but yeah.
So you guys have, your relationship story is pretty, it sounds pretty traditional. I guess you would say that you guys met professionally and, had a liking for each other and kind of pushed it from there. But I've had conversations with Mitch, and what I know is that the relationships take work. Tell me about some of the work you had to put into to make this relationship work.
The work put in to make the relationship work. I think for any couple that lasts this long, man.
Yeah.
I think that I'm a believer that people meet one another during the right seasons of their lives. And that I think that we are a sum of our experiences. And that it just so happens that, the sum of my experiences at the time that I met Kadeen with the sum of her experiences like worked well. And take into consideration we were friends for a while before like things became a relationship. And what I'm getting at is, you know, I think if I was a previous like version or iteration of myself, we may not be here today, right? If she was a previous iteration of herself, we may not be here today. And I think that, even with that being the case, man, like you still have to work on things and improve yourself, right? And so, one of the first conversations we had, like after that dinner, was like walking around. You remember this? Walking around like the Capitol grounds where you stayed, and it was like, it was for me. It was friendship building stuff, and I don't know what it was for you, but it was like, how do you communicate? You know what I'm saying? Like, what are your thoughts on this? What are your thoughts on that? It was genuinely getting to know this woman as a person. And my first thought after meeting her was that, she's gonna make a great life partner for someone. It wasn't even that it would be me, but I just thought like she's a great dope woman. Like she's gonna make a great partner for someone. And I think that over time and getting to know her, there are some things that I liked and some things that I was like, oh, this is interesting, right? And you just make a decision whether or not you're gonna like learn and grow from one another and like push through it or not. I don't know if there's a specific I don't know if there's a specific example of something. I think that do you have a specific example of like learning and growing?
Here's maybe more guys. Did
Okay.
you guys have any things from your past that might have caused conflict in your relationship? And not past like relationships or like exes, but maybe things that you experienced growing up that you might have had to, that might have, took some growth together in order for you guys to be closer. You know what I mean?
Growth together. I think that there are.
Like, for instance, Mitch, you were telling me, you talked about your dad leaving.
Yeah, that's
And
what I was
so,
about to say. Yeah.
We spoke earlier about generational trauma.
Yeah.
Some guys, that affects them in a way where it makes it difficult for them to be the man who they need to be to a woman, and so that causes conflict. So that's kind of the direction I'm going.
I
And
got
if there's
you.
none, then I mean,
I think that there are. I think that there are things that I had to go through as an individual. I don't know, but I think that the beauty of it is that I acknowledge I had to tackle those things as an individual before I joined life with another person. And so I don't know if I did that in its entirety, right? But I think that I did a pretty good job at saying, like, before you start a life with anybody else, you need to be whole and you need to be at a place, And so, and there were many things as an individual I had to tackle, man. And so, my mom and dad are no longer married, right? Not just that, but to take it a step further, my grandmother and grandfather are not married. They divorced, right? My mom and dad divorced. My aunts and uncles have been married and divorced and remarried, several times over. And I'm saying this not as a slight to them, but I'm more so painting the picture and giving context that, as I came into this world, and as I'm like a teen, and I'm just starting to process love and relationships and all of what that means, right, and the interest around it, I didn't necessarily have like these, you know, textbook examples or these great examples of this is how a man loves a woman, and this is how he treats a woman, and you know, this is how, you know, relationships last during the test of time, right? And so I wasn't able to sort of articulate that at that time in my life, um, but I was processing it. And when it got to a place, let's say in high school or in college, when you start to like, my mom calls it the puppy love stage, right? When you sort of first meet someone and get really, really attached to them, and you say, I'm in love, and all of these things, right? At that point, around that point, I acknowledge that, you know, when it comes time for me to have a life partner, there's some things I need to address, right? And because all the experience and the things that I've seen in my life, you know, has not taught me how to succeed at this. And the reality is, I haven't had any conversations, whether that's with mom, dad, or whomever, to say, you know, how do I go about succeeding in this? And so, you know, my thought is that, you know, I think the trauma of not seeing a successful marriage and a successful relationship allowed me to sort of ask the right questions and go outside of my immediate family and extended family to try to get those answers. And I wasn't shy at all about that. I would go to my best friend's family. I would go to strangers at a restaurant if I saw them sort of seemingly mad, or all the while, you know, me dating and figuring out life. It wasn't that I waited until sort of I had a special someone where I tried to sort of ask these questions and figure it out. I think at a fairly young age, I figured out before I make those decisions, I need to have this sort of knowledge and figure it out. And yeah, I felt comfortable. I felt comfortable that I sort of was working on that. And even when I met Kadeen, I like communicated this to her, and I was still like collecting data, right? I was like, oh, your parents have been married. Let me talk to them. Like, let me talk to your dad and let me get his thoughts and all of that. And so I think she saw that, even if she didn't think like I was a serious suitor for her, she saw that I was serious about wanting to be the best husband I can be when the time came. Yeah.
Interesting.
And I think you touched on something that I was going to mention, but I'll add to that. I think one of the things that you have to embrace in marriage, in a relationship, in the same way that you might embrace this in your career or whatever else, is you have to be a lifelong learner. So your relationship is going to evolve. You as an individual, your partner will evolve, and that means things may change, or that means how you once did things may not work 5 years from now, 10 years from now. So I think one of your goals needs to be, or at least one of my goals, is continuing to learn myself and my partner. And that's easy sometimes, and it's not easy sometimes.
Talk about when it wasn't easy
I think,
for you.
so I think when you are in a relationship, you want the relationship to just always be great. You know there will be challenges, you know there will be things that you don't like, and there will be things that your partner doesn't like. And I think it can become difficult either when you're not communicating about things that you are unhappy about, or when you are unwilling to embrace or accept kind of the feedback and the criticism or the message that your partner is trying to share with you. And I think those two things can make it a challenge. But if you are willing to embrace one, if you're in a relationship with the expectation or with the goal of it being a lifelong relationship or long-term relationship, and two, if you know that you and your partner have that same goal, then the third thing that you should be focusing on is being willing to accept the criticism, but also being willing to communicate when things aren't always great. So I think that's really important.
Yeah. The lifelong learning piece is the key. So when I prior to me proposing to Kadeen, I suggested that we do relationship therapy counseling, and the reality was, it's like I hate saying this because I think that it's a misconception, but I say it to be empowering to a degree as well. Like, our relationship was great. It was perfect when I suggested this. We weren't, well, I believe it was.
No, I wasn't. I wasn't laughing to say it wasn't. It was. It was really good.
And so when we went to therapy, you know, what I said to the therapist, I said, look, things are good now, but I'm coming to you because I know, like, they won't always be good, right? We're going to disagree. We're going to beef. You know, she not going to want to see me. I'm not going to want to see her. And I want to know the tools and techniques to get through that. And it's best that we learn that now while things are, like, great and amazing and loving, so that we can somewhat master and perfect those tools and techniques when we have those tough times. And you know, in addition to that, prior to us getting married, we did 3 different premarital classes. That was a direct result of me being traumatized. Like, direct result of it. You know, me feeling like, yo, like, I want to be good at this. And I can't necessarily say that I know how to be good at it, right? And so, you know, let me sort of get from these experts and people I respect, and let me see, like, what they think about, you know, if you take Kadeen as a unique person, Mitch as a unique person, like, based on what you know of us, how can sort of we make this thing work long term, forever? And so, you know, I definitely know that there was trauma that went into the decision makings, but I think, you know, I humbly say it was with, like, the trauma was sort of identified, and it was churned into, like, some positive sort of action as a result of it. So fortunately, it was not trauma that had a negative action and then I had to learn a result from that, but it was trauma, I think, identified, diagnosed, and it was me saying, like, all right, how can I make this sort of work and do its thing for me within my relationship?
Nice. Well, thank you for sharing that. I know it, you know, being vulnerable is not easy. My next question is, so to kind of get out of these heavy questions, my next question is just more towards, you know, how has writing art and music helped you perceive your experience as an African American? I don't know if that's a good way to explain it. I'll still work on this question, but
I was about to say, just to clarify, like, some example or context to it.
It's really just kind of like, you know, like, what type of art and music do you like and why? How does it affect you?
Oh, okay.
And that's pretty much what, you know, all I'm saying.
Okay. Say it like that then.
Yeah. Hey, bro, everybody takes things differently. But you're right, I should have said it like that. But yeah, what type of art and music do you like and how does it affect you? How does it affect your experience?
I make that face because, you know, I don't believe I can be boxed in. I never want to be boxed in Chris Rock has this really funny comedy show and skit, and he was talking about like life partners and soulmates, and he said something like, I'm never gonna find somebody that likes the Wu-Tang Clan and Seinfeld, right? And so what I'm getting at is that, each of us are this unique, super interesting, you know, uh, tastes and preferences and all of these things, right? And so, I love what they call real rap, right? And some folks have sort of tried to sort of recategorize that into these different pockets, right? So sort of gangster rap or whatever the case may be. But the idea that real rap talks about life as I saw it growing up in my community, and just sort of hearing that and hearing how people went through that, and and I think it's super cool to hear about it from different pockets of the country. And so you can hear from someone in Atlanta, or you can hear from someone in Cali, right? Like a Nipsey Hussle or a Dr. Dre back in the day, or what have you. Be like, yo, y'all doing that just how that happens in DC, right? Just how I see that here. And so I think the idea of real rap and hip hop for me is it's almost therapeutic. I think it's therapeutic for the artist, right? To be able to get that stuff out of their head or based on their experiences and put it on paper. In the same way, I think that it's therapeutic for the people that hear it, because they get a sense that sort of folks come from similar situations and circumstances, and almost at the end of all of it, it's like, but you too can still prosper, right? And you too can still like give back and change your family situation, right? And so I had it on repeat all day, every day, right? And at the same time, I'm getting into late night jazz and Miles Davis and the different artists, right? Gregory Porter, right? And so, I believe that, my music is a reflection of who I am and sort of the journey that I'm on. And I think that's a cool thing, right? And so, and as far as writing is concerned, uh, what I'm into nonfiction books. I think you do more fiction books, and but I think that it has a direct correlation to the profession that I've chosen to go through. So I'm into history, and how can I learn from history in order to create a product or service, right, that can stand the test of time. I'm into business and innovation and autobiographies and learning from great people before me and their like situation and circumstances and how they were able to navigate through life to become who they are. And so I think those particular types of writings, autobiographies, business, and history, I'm really into those. And I think at one point I was into fiction, but not so much anymore. It has its reasons for why. Not that one is better than the other. I just like the idea, when I finish a book, I get up and I feel empowered. Like, literally, I feel empowered. I have in my laptop or a journal where I just start typing and writing ideas. And we met with a gentleman on Friday. We grabbed breakfast with someone, and a very successful person. And he was saying, at one point over the Thanksgiving holiday, he had like 110 notes in his phone with just ideas based on, what he was looking at, what he was inspired by, and his immediate surroundings. I can't tell you how much of a kindred spirit that is for me, because it's exactly what happens with me. I can be like anywhere listening to music or reading a book, and if a book is really inspiring me, I have to put it down, and I'm like, I'm getting that inspiration to say, oh, this is how this connects or implies in my life, and I'm getting the idea based on that, right? And you know, I think holistically overall, you know, it's inspiration, and I think that, you know, it's inspiration in a positive way, as long as you're able to deduct like the message from it, and channel some positive energy from it.
It's really deep. So in terms of music, I think I have similar music tastes to Mitch, or a varied music taste, but I tend to listen to a lot of the same. So I spend a lot of my time listening to gospel, because I think I have a very even temperament, and that's kind of like how I like to spend my days. So when I'm working, I'm listening to my gospel Pandora station and all of that. And I'll throw in like the Beyoncés and the Cardi B's and all of that from time to time. And when we're partying, like I love to hear the party music. But I think a lot of my focus, or a lot of what I take in, is more so centered in that space. In terms of writing, or at least talking about books, I do prefer, or I spend more time reading fiction. And a lot of that is probably because as an attorney, I'm reading all the time. So when I'm reading for leisure, I want to kind of escape the world of law and read something else that I can enjoy. So unless it's like Becoming, Michelle Obama's Becoming, or Justice Sonia Sotomayor's autobiography, I'm going to be reading nonfiction work. So there's a book that I recently read called Homegoing. It traces the story of a family from being uprooted in Africa, and traces kind of how the family diverged into these two different paths, and it lays out how one decision here, one decision there, one experience here, one experience there completely and drastically shifts the outcome of someone's life. So things like that, or just James Patterson novels, or all of those types of things. I like.
Is that the guy you like, James Patterson?
Yeah, I'll read.
She be getting some James Patterson books.
I usually will, anytime I travel, almost always, I'll stop in like the bookstore in the airport, and I'll buy a new book. So I'll read the book either on the plane, or try and finish it by the time that trip is over, or whatever the case is. And that's kind of my thing. I love to read. I've always loved to read. So when I can, it's usually something that's kind of an escape from everything else.
And you guys don't own any art or anything like that? Or do you guys?
No.
How's your experience with that? I mean, you haven't really mentioned it. I don't know if I actually said it or not.
Art?
I said art, literature, and music, right?
Well, you said music and writing.
I said music and writing. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I should have put
art in there.
Like paintings and whatnot.
Yeah, we don't own any as a couple. Actually, we got the piece my dad got for us.
Yeah, but I'm thinking, are you thinking painting,
art,
or are you thinking all art?
Sculpture. Like, do you include sculptures in that? Do you include?
Well, it's really what you include. Because
Okay.
I mean, again, it is diverse, but what is your exposure to it?
Yeah. So I take those as different questions. I'll try to touch on them. I grew up, my exposure to art has been pretty high. My mom has always kept art in her living quarters, right? And so I've always been able to see it around me, feel it around me. You know, she would do things like go to Duke Ellington and pick out art from, you know, teenage students, to go out to I don't know, some festival, right? And pick out art at a festival to
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So as a child, uh, my mom like exposed us to art at a early age, and uh, it was art from all different levels and um, I'll say backgrounds, right? So some Asian art in there, some African art in there, some American art in there, and so and there was always her sort of interest in putting that art in the home, and us walking out or being with her and saying, "Why did you get that? Like, what is this? This is in our space now, and this is in our home." And she would have 3 kids. One or two of us would ask questions about it, and I think that my mom loved the idea that we would ask those questions, and she's had this like Socratic method about it where she would say, so what do you think? What do you see? Right? And I think the idea, and I even say this to Kadeen now, but the idea of having art that uh, can be interpreted by different people in different ways, I love that. And possibly I loved it because I grew up on that, right? So as a child, I would say, well, I see this, and I think this. And my mom would be like, okay, interesting. And talk to my brother. So, Ty, what do you see? Right? And we would talk about it. And as a kid, that wasn't necessarily my expectation when the art came into the home or it was hung up on the wall. My expectation wasn't to sort of get excited about talking about what I see and how I interpret it. But I think that was some sort of genius on my mom's part. And so as a result, I liked it until there was art where, the artist was looking to interpret for me, right? And so I was like, oh, I don't agree with that. I don't like that. So I learned a little bit about myself in that process. And I think that to this day, I still appreciate art that different folks can interpret in different ways. And I started to really expand my understanding of what art can mean, right? So that's visual canvas painting, that's sculptures, that's music, that's writing, that's like art can manifest and look like so many different things, right? And so I think that the older I get, the more I have this interest to have art in our home and have that art to speak for who we are and sort of how we view the world, how we see the world. I think that's one of the pretty cool things, and I think that it's a great like conversation piece to have art in your home, and to sort of you get a chance to see how people think and process the world around them.
I think art for me has always focused more on music and dance. Growing up, I mentioned kind of singing in church, but I'm also a former pianist. So my brother and I used to play all the time, and I think a lot of that world was centered around melodies from the piano and the orchestra and those types of things. I also used to dance growing up. But in addition to that, attending plays and theater and welcoming art into my world in that way. So everything from more contemporary plays to traditional folklore, Jamaica related kind of plays that we attended and participated in growing up. Like those are the types of things that really resonate with me. And I think it was until college that I started focusing more on art on display through painting and photography and those types of things. one of the things that I love, especially as it relates to painting, is just how well artists are able to make whatever the subject of the art is come to life. So I love seeing texture in art, and I love seeing emotion, expression kind of pushing through the canvas, and I like being able to see that kind of in the finished product. I'm a far way off from any of those talents, but I really enjoy being able to see that from other people. So I'm looking forward to us being able to have art in our home, and as Mitch says, allow it to speak differently to people, because everyone can see something different from whatever piece of art they're looking at.
I think that was well said, how you said, the texture and it speaking to you and sort of jumping off the canvas. I think that's what I like so much about the Obama presidential portrait. I feel like it's bigger than the space of the canvas that it's on in some like unique, amazing way. It like jumps off that canvas. So I think from the colors to the definition to everything.
Seeing like the texture and his face, like the lines in his face, like those types of features. It's really cool to see it translate in that way.
Yeah.
Nice. You guys really love those paintings.
Yeah.
Michelle, do you like hers?
I do. I prefer Mr. President's, in part because I think his is a little bit closer of a depiction of what he looks like. And although I love Mrs. Obama's painting, has some color, but it's a little bit more muted. And I like how, to Mitch's point, President Obama's photo jumps off the page.
So you want more photorealistic. You like a more photorealistic painting, but you still want somehow the expression of the artist to be in there as well. Okay.
Yeah. I would use the word definition. I think you like the definition of the detail and definition of the Baroque painting, because we talked about it before, sort of what we like, what we don't like about it. We went to the museum to see it together, and it was, sort of the details to her point, like the face and the flowers in the background, and also the definition, where and I think the painting by the woman that commissioned Michelle's was really good. It's just like the facial definition is nowhere near the same. You know what I mean? It's nowhere near the same.
Yeah. Ashley is she's more representative. I mean, she has the ability to paint that way, but she chooses not to. It's actually harder to paint the way Ashley paints than it is the way to paint that Kahinde paints. Kahinde is more of a he went to Yale, and that's a school that traditionally teaches you to paint classically. So they're telling you that you have to paint things, and it has to be kind of photorealistic because that clientele, wants that. Whereas Ashley had to paint, she had to fight through what I guess the art world's idea of beauty is, and she had to stick with her own aesthetic. So it's kind of nice that she got chosen because of those things that stack up against her. Michelle could have just got a traditional portrait that looked more like her, but she chose not to. You know what I mean? But that's not actually new. A lot of the presidents have done that. If you look at JFK's portrait, his portrait he just has his face down. It's very strange.
We realized that his was uniquely done. And I think Bill Clinton's was pretty unique.
Yeah, Bill Clinton had a
and
lot.
there's someone else. I can't remember who else, but
Somebody else has some more else. So the last two things, and these are actually more or less just kind of a game and just a summarization. So in this game, I like to, it's a word game. I'm gonna ask you a word, and all you gotta do is give me a one-word answer, but it has to be quick and it has to be off the top of your mind.
Okay.
All right.
Well,
so
we like to deliberate, so we're gonna see how this goes.
All right.
who's going first?
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
And maybe one person doesn't have to answer them once.
Why don't you go first, and then I'll go after you, or you want it to be the other way around?
Let's just do it together. Like if you think of something.
Just
And
you
just
saying
say
say it.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's no nothing to be anymore.
Okay.
Yeah.
Moms,
Loving. Yeah.
grandma,
Activism.
And warm embrace.
dad,
Patient.
Love.
brother,
Playful.
Renaissance man.
Fort Lauderdale,
Lauderdale Drop.
Lauderdale Drop. That is the first thing to come to
Home.
mind.
DC,
Mambo's house.
No. First thing that come to mind is home. The word home.
Duke,
I need to stick to my one.
Smart
word
people.
answers. Growth.
Kwanzaa,
Values.
I think values is good.
activism,
Grandma. And Marion Barry.
thinking too hard.
I
Power,
know. I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. See.
Power.
She's gonna deliberate that thing.
Power's the new word.
Okay. Power to the people.
Love.
Right? You want power to equal love?
Could you explain that a little bit? I'm curious about that.
I think, at least in my mind, when I think of powerful couples, they say like power couple, all those types of things. I think of people who love each other unconditionally. And in order to have power anywhere, I think there are different ways to be powerful, but having love from people around you is one way that happens. Especially I think within the
Her
context of a
brain
relationship.
thinks pretty deeply on a regular. So, like, I'm still processing what she's saying and how she got that in like 2 seconds of a response.
Oh, that's just a lifelong definition, though, right? Yeah, there's no thought in that. It's just how she feels. I get it, though. That's why I wanted to expound upon it, because I didn't expect that.
Right.
Money.
I mean, I should have an immediate response to that, but
It
I
should be
don't.
something like hers, right? It should be like, shifting culture or something like that.
Well, the reality is when I think about money, I have this, don't mean to suck my teeth, I have this sort of dual thought going on, where the one side of me is like, yeah, like, get as much as you can. Like, you know, you want to liken it to, not necessarily success, but just like the impulse reaction when you say money is like, give me, you know? And then another part of me feels like it's a tool to be used for like the greater good of humanity, right? It's simply a tool. And the other part of me is like, you know, be humbled in that journey, in that process for money, and don't let it consume you, right? And so literally when I hear it, I have like this, like both reactions, like looking to jump out, and it clouds my thoughts on it.
So you really haven't really, what's the word? It's a conflation.
Conflation. Okay, I need to research that.
Yeah.
But that sounds about right.
Well, because it's good. So in conflation, but you get to break it together, though, the two opposing thoughts at some point, and make them mean something. But yeah, it's a
Okay.
conflation of thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's interesting though. 'Cause
Yeah.
it's like, I guess that would make sense. Like you want to get money, you want to get as much as you can, but
Right.
like, I don't know, for some reason it's like I learned like that doesn't make any difference. I can have all the money in the world, it's not going to make a difference.
Yeah.
So it's like, what do I do with it? You
Yeah,
know? But
yeah.
I completely understand how you feel about that.
What's your reaction on it?
The first word that I thought of, and I don't know if this is a great word, but I thought of flexibility.
Oh yeah, that is
Giving
a
you
good
the
word.
flexibility to
Be and live
and
navigate.
give it away too. I remember one of my wine sisters when we were in college or law school, we were having a conversation about how I think college we want to become wealthy, but not just for our own families and what have you, but so we can just give it away and like be able to do good in the lives of other people. And if money allows you the flexibility to also take care of yourself, but also help to take care of others too.
That's good.
So.
That's really good. The last one is, all right, so now your legacy has been set in stone. It's time to create this beautiful portrait of the two of you. I kind of have an idea of how I'm going to do it, but the question is, in this portrait, how do you want to be portrayed?
So firstly, do you want the portrait to be collective or individual?
They're individual.
Okay.
They're individual.
Okay.
Okay.
So I'll let you go first.
So I want to be able to look at the portrait and see a sophisticated woman. So I can look and I can see the career and all these other types of things. But I also want to be able to see strength. I don't know if I'm
Okay.
just kind of
Word.
describing this in the best way.
We're gonna take it. Okay.
And I also want to see I'll say that. I'll say sophistication and strength.
Okay.
But I'm thinking about whether I want.
You want
either,
a softer word in there too.
Well, that's what I was thinking about.
Yeah.
Whether
We're trying to figure that word out.
right.
Yeah. We
So
finished
whether-
one another thoughts. We do this.
So that could look like. Other words that I think could fit in there are peace, vulnerability.
Oh, that would be interesting and challenging. How do you paint strength and vulnerability?
Well, and that's why I'm like, I don't know, I'm
Oh.
throwing out too many
Oh.
words. And then I'm having too many thoughts now. A softer, sexier side, like a sultry side. Like I want kind of those.
To be strong, but to
be-
also be like, damn, who that? That's just- Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe kind of what
yeah.
I want.
Yeah. I've seen that in sort of in paintings depicted before, like
Oh, yeah? Which
strength.
one?
But I don't. When we went to MoMA in New York,
Oh.
and we did like many exhibits there, and I haven't been to an art exhibit before that in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And so, funny enough, in answering your questionnaire, we took pictures when we were at the MoMA. So I went back and started looking through my pictures because I was trying to identify like a painting or artist or two that I could like put on paper to say like I'm thinking about this or in this direction. And I couldn't find anything good. I was not happy about that. And I realized that, now and I know when I go to museums that I like stuff, I should take a picture of the piece of art, but also like the name plaque, right after it. And I realized that as a result of sort of, preparing for this conversation.
Yeah.
So one don't come to mind, but if I were to see it, then I would be able to point to it,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So how do you want to be portrayed?
How do I want to be portrayed? I think there's a certain set of feelings I want to have, and I want people to have when they see it. And so I'll try to touch on sort of adjectives, but I'll look to sort of, so I'll answer your question directly and indirectly with the feelings too. So one, I would like for folks to see I have this image of like this matriarch and patriarch, right? And like the making in the early part of their marriage and lives, right? And so to be able to sort of see that in like a snapshot in time is what I'm going for. So the question becomes like, what do you think about when you think about patriarch? You think about like vision, like someone having vision, someone having street sense or intelligence. I think that's a better word, right? Someone being firm but also beloved, right, at the same time. And so those are some of the words that come to mind. I think that when I look at the Barack piece, the presidential portrait, I really like the symbolism that's in there, sort of with the different flowers from his hometown and where he's from, and I like the definition and detail about it. And so like the fact that like you can see like, oh, that's him, and sort of that's how his face makes the smile or whatever the case may be, right? And also, you know, it feels, you know, an authentic depiction of him where, you know, so if you were to ask friends and family, they would say like, Mitch is always in a suit, right? And so the fact that like, you know, he's in a suit or I would be in a suit or something to that effect, right? In my piece of art. So I like those things. And I think that's what I would want to convey.
Okay. So, you both have given answers. I want you to say it for me one more time, but summarize them what you said, and then summarize them what you said, so I can use it later for sound bites and video bites and stuff like that.
Yeah, I saw that. I saw how you had the person talk about their piece, and then like as they were talking, you transitioned then to the art that you.
I take that last piece of the interview
Yeah.
and use it for social media because, you know, some people will look at the interview and most people who on social media are just going to want to see the 30 seconds. And I think that, you know what I mean, it you know, leads them to maybe want to know more and whatnot. So I always like to make it's really more for your representation. I can put up what you said, but I think that it won't necessarily represent you as well as if you had a chance to explain it, and now maybe you can say it in a more
concise,
and clear way.
Yeah. Okay.
So I would like my portrait to show strength, sophistication, but also a softer, more sultry side. I think I embody all of those things, and it would be awesome to see it represented on one canvas.
I would like my portrait to convey the sense of a patriarch in the making, to show firmness and to show vision, and that being depicted in a piece. At the same time, having this genuine spirit of you can look at this piece and say this person was beloved. He's seemingly like he was a loving, caring person, right? And I think that it's possible to be a benevolent leader of a family, at the same time be firm and strong in that.
Thanks.